One characteristic of Rated R I forgot to note with respect to advanced track considerations to Our Time Will Come. You and I, now being 8 tracks in out of a 10-track album lineup, are starting to get, well, you're possibly starting to get, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm experiencing, just on personal reflection, a view of a more pinpointed navigation. Think of where we started with Rated R together with Surrogates, the initiation track, in fact, the first single, and void of me taking that personalized experience of it in terms of a thorough study of lyrics, whether it be on reference to band interpretation if provided. I believe it has. I think some Ever Read fans have mentioned that in previous comments. I would need to confirm that. Anyway, taking a deeper dive with it, absent of that, on superficial appearances, it comes across as a more abstract piece on narrative summation. But now that we're 8 tracks in, especially in respect of the second half, what I've noticed is, I would say, like a rough inverted pyramid structure, where the beginning of the album in Rated R's philosophy is a little more broad, but we become a little more direct and pinpointed in theming and on statements. In fact, some of these pieces are starting to intersect too on related themes. There are connections that are starting to be adopted. I would say specifically with respect to the suffering and still bleeding, I'm starting to see threads. And Our Time Will Come, if you consider the lyrics ahead of entertaining the song, I think you'll also notice how pinpointed the message now is. It's a resonant theme, and I think it's one that will easily connect however we approach it, whether it be on spiritual grounds or just general philosophical truths of life. It's still an interesting piece, though, and of course, you're seeing the reintroduction terminology as I've organized this video. Of course, I've spoken about this before in terms of where we're placed in our mutual journey for Rated R, but I promised you a long time ago, though on a fresh witness regard. And if you want a more detailed explanation as to what happened, go refer to the suffering. There was a slight bump in the road. Anywho, I'm still kind of mourning the loss of those early introductions, but to take a relapse journey for Rated R with you has been a good fill-in journey. Still, returning to Red is great, and experiencing Rated R fully in mutual company. That's been the circumstance that isolates this album from any of the others of the past library. All of those I've enjoyed by myself, but we're taking that deep dive together. As I've always said for a while, music is best enjoyed in company. I love highlighting it here. It's a favorite artistic language in my life, and however we approach, I want to welcome all. Longtime fans like myself who have a deep relationship to this group, of course, you all have a seat here, but I do hope that there are some of you that are approaching on a more diverse respect to that, and that you are initiate listeners who have not yet been welcomed into Red's graces, but this perhaps could be an initiation path for you. And if you're looking for a place to begin, I think Rated R is a great fit. If you want an album, in fact, there's a bit of a fresh voice to it and spirit, though the Red roots are certainly alive, and whatever types of eras you look, I would say Rated R is a great mixture of Red's strengths compiled, like the last album was, in fact, Declaration. I felt that was also, like this one, a good compilation with some fresh adaptations on voice and some specific stylization traits that do make it a bit of a divergent album in its own respects, specifically the dominance on synths. That's been a more pronounced element this time around. But if you still want that dominant Red voice that you know and love, that you're welcome to, maybe you're not yet, Rated R, I think, will be a good first taste for you. One that is an absorbative work. It really is just an engrossing experience. And if you are, in fact, of initiation standing and you'd love to look deeper into their library, I will be the first person to say just go look at anything. I have their entire library on my phone. There's too many recommendations I could provide. Rated R, though, is a great journey. We're going to humor and never work together, you and I. Again, whatever type of respect we have to it. Fresh initiation or, like me, perhaps reintroductions. I didn't foresee this happening. I can't state it enough. Anyway, but it's okay. This is the present. We're making do with life circumstances. But it's a welcome retreat. Rated R I've really liked as a release. In particular, being a metalhead of many years, one that does lean more in favorability, but keep an open door to the aggressive Fred. It's been so nice to have that voice so centralized on this album. With some interesting deviations on pacing. And from what I remember of Our Time Will Come, I've been noting this previously too, I've intentionally stayed away from a lot of these tracks within the second half of the album to the best extent that I can, so it's as fresh of a reintroduction experience for your benefit. Though I think I remember, yes, this one, oh yeah, in particular, it is this one from what I remember. Our Time Will Come is like some of these earlier pieces in that what I've said now about 10 tracks in, where if we consider past Red eras, and there are individualized spots for, they're warranted spots, I think, and many rock groups employ this. The intention might be to demonstrate a diversified application of instrumental scoring and mood. Maybe it's because of the pacing of the album. There's been cases in many sessions past at different groups that some pieces come across as break periods or pause numbers in the aggressive fret. Rated R has no such tracks that are of that direct focus, but those pauses are creatively interwoven. That's been the story to some of these past couple pieces like The Suffering, Tell Me How to Say Goodbye, and Our Time Will Come also has that particular placement. The second half is really interesting, I would say, in terms of illuminating some of those fresh traits with Rated R. If there is, in fact, I think a specialized focus to these last 5 pieces, from what I remember of them, and I can't speak to Emergency I've completely forgotten about, so that might as well be a fresh track when we go into it on exposure. But these first 4 pieces to get to that conclusion do demonstrate, again, that individualized tailoring that is a bit specific to Rated R, and one that I found quite unique. And that's a great way to describe this album generally. It's a unique one on their library. Like their last album, Declaration, definitely follows suit in that path, though again, Rated R has its own specialized voice, and it has been a great journey to humor alongside all of you. So, let's continue in fulfilling that promise I made you again so long ago. I forget how long it's been. I've taken my time, not by intention. Let's re-enter the graces of Rated R together through the 8th song, Our Time Will Come, and you'll start to see what I'm talking about perhaps if this is an initiation encounter for you. Our Time Will Come displays those traits readily. It's not something you have to really dig too far for. But it still has connections to the general album. These types of openings, I've said before, you're let in, you think balanced, ballad-like, striking vocals, key, and yet that's great. Still that harsh fret readily comes through. The isolations though in that origin are great, and then you have the strings. I forgot about that. Coming off that last number too, it's just beautiful. See the balanced traits interwoven together, soft and harsher tones. There's been a really specific touch on this album. See, as I said, directed focus on lyrics. Diverges slightly from the origin. I love how delicate these last couple pieces are. Again, the precision on how they're illustrated and expressed on different red familiarities, strings, voice, tone. It's just really clicking. Balance, I think, is a great way to describe the last half. I'll explain more what I mean when we reach the end of the song. You'll understand, I think. It has that wonderful troubled essence on the strings. Don't you love that? And it still wouldn't be fair to call this a ballad piece generally, but again, it's the mixing that's so interesting of this last half.
Someday our time is gonna come, ashes to ashes.
The strings really... Forgot about that. That was beautiful. Again, I love the tone of the strings on this one. Besides the riffs, the strings are tasked with doing a lot of the momentum lifting. Our Time Will Come really is an interesting one. It is, I would say, it wouldn't be fair, again, to say that this is a general ballad number, because it's not. You can tell, again, by the way we're introduced on a rougher route, it has the heavier riff styling that makes it right in line of rated R as a release. And yet, there's this creative interweaving of different styles that some of our groups, you can think of, I'm sure, examples for yourself, whether it be in the metal or rock landscapes, Christian or secular. I've seen a broad mix myself. Many in particular of late appearance, at least in what we've surveyed together of different groups' effects on this channel, with secular credits. Certainly in the symphonic metal territory, which I have said, because of that strings presentation, it puts Red in an intersection point, though they're not necessarily described as symphonic metal directly or of dominant. There might be some cross traits, I think is the best way to say it, but they're not, at least I've never seen them explicitly identified solely as a symphonic metal group, and I do think their application diverges them a bit into different metal and rock spheres, if you want to go boil it down to particulars. This song, too, it's like an intersection point of different Red strengths, specifically on tone. You get, as I said, balance. That's what I would describe the last half of this album from what I remember, at least to the respect of these first three pieces. The Suffering, Still Bleeding, and Our Time Will Come all considered together. This is really interesting to me, especially on a reflective study. Now, I will admit that, especially coming off that last encounter of Rated R, my heart does drift again to the heavier pieces. So songs like Still Bleeding or Surrogates or Your Devil is a Ghost or some of the other earlier ones, those really pull at me, especially that last one. I still can't get over Still Bleeding, how good it is. My favorite on the record, I think, admittedly. Though I'm, again, not one to rank things, I've made exception with that piece because I think it's so good. Our Time Will Come does drift in a bit of a softer appearance, but it's still, again, not fair to credit it as a ballad number because the intersection points of aggression level it up from, again, being at a ballad threshold continually. Though you, again, are opening the song thinking, oh, this is going to be the pause number specifically, again, warranted that we are, typically speaking by other adjacent models and past Red experiences, we're at the 8th track out of 10. Like, this could be a suitable place to have that breath, and yet it still is. But again, superficially, it's not. You walk in, you're like, okay, there's this tantalizing intro with, again, the strings intermixing and the vocal register, which is so nice. I love the vocals on this record. And this one specifically feels so true to Red in past experiences. It feels like a core expression of our library in a middle ground point on energy. But again, you enter and then the heavier riffs kick in, the vocals are a little more subdued upon the verse structure, and then the choruses kick in, and you really get that strings pull. I think, in particular, the tracking of the number, in this case, it's not solely reliant. Like, look at the transition on the bridge instrumental with the Our Time Will Come line before we enter the third refrain of the chorus, and the key slightly changes. Good differentiation, by the way, and I do like the cutoff. Again, Our Time Will Come feels like some of the other tracks on this record, very specific. It's isolated in some of its central choices that have not been mimicked in experiences past. Maybe they've probably done abrupt outro cutoffs before, but they're not hitting me, at least on just present reflection like this one does. It feels like an evident contrast, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think it's an interesting one, because it doesn't come across, at least by present appearances, to me as something of a mimicked nature. It feels, again, fresh. Each track on this record in some way feels specified. Our Time Will Come, I think, is the best testament of this, though there are intersections with it that put it, again, right in line with Rated R expectations and sufficient delivery. Whether it be on narrative strength, again, you see that pinpointed focus. Someday our time is going to come. Don't waste your life till it's over. I think it's been the most explicit on direction some of these tracks have been in terms of narrative theming, with, again, a philosophical or spiritual lens, depending on your personal interpretation. And certainly with familiar adages, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, no matter how commonplace or contemporary it might be in today's society and our general vernacular, I think it's a great summary point for, if you want to take that Someday Our Time Is Going to Come section and boil it down just to 6 words, I think it's a great way to constrain the line. It's actually a really fitting phrase. But again, it becomes a little more directed with Our Time Will Come. You see that, right? That's been true over the second half, that we're starting to get a more evident, fixed line of explanation. Less abstract and seemingly wild, as maybe I would say like Surrogates or some of the other songs might appear. Though again, I'm not saying that there isn't an intended meaning supplied by the artist or individualized interpretations that would further specify it. Of course, individual specifications, that's for you to decide, and band declaration, that might have been offered. Again, I would need to review on that, specifically with Surrogates, respecting maybe some of the other songs. It's just that Our Time Will Come comes across very differently to me, and puts some of the other numbers of experiences in recent past in that same line of thinking for me. It's an interesting piece. The second half demonstrates balance, and I think identification is also another great descriptor. These numbers are very easy to identify in individual characteristics. Like this one I would say is the most ballad in appearance, especially when those core sections kick in. It comes across, again, mimicking some of the other verses with certain breaks, again, creatively illustrated with dynamic string use, and it's still that hard riff is not absent, so it feels, again, core to Red expression, but it does reside in a softer territory, I think. So again, we have, I would say, a pseudo break number. It's really interesting on this album, I think. And, I could see perhaps, again, like myself, our first-hand favorability is going to be directed more perhaps to the harsh works. And that's admittedly against my favorite slide, but I think Our Time Will Come is quite interesting when you study the specifics of it. You really sit down with the piece and you consider on a meticulous point-by-point lens, you start to see these specialized attributes that put it in a similar respect to other tracks on the record, in that it is somewhat differentiated. I like it. Again, if you want a good mix in, this is true to Rated R fully. If you want a balanced survey and mix between strong leading Red roots of eras past that we Red fans, of course, all respect and love, and some renewed exploration, I think it's a better word to say than like what I said in sessions past, experimentation. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration that doesn't, I think it oversteps Rated R a bit. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you feel differently, but I think exploration is a better term. It feels like it's digging not too far from the Red roots, just some slight toying. It does, again, feel specific as a Red release, very much like Declaration did to me. Nevertheless, though, it's still, of course, quite an interesting song, as Rated R fully has been. Of course, it's even better enjoying it with all of you. And I'd love to hear your individualized thoughts on this piece down below, and from whatever angle you approach. Of course, I welcome any perspective. Music, as I said, is highly individualized, as well as the angle, that we take. Longtime fans or initiate listeners, I welcome everybody. I'd love to hear what you think of Our Time Will Come. 2 more tracks to go as we round out our study of the album together. Finally, there's a it's bittersweet that we're getting to the end, at the same time, I'm also like, this is great. I'm finally fulfilling what I told you I'd deliver on so long ago. And these will come out quickly, much sooner than the initiation to the second half study did. Those first 2 tracks, boy, I drug that one out. Again, not by intention. Anyway, in present standing, it's fun to return to Red, and it's even better to entertain them in the graces of all of you. And that'll continue, I believe, into Last Forever is our next piece. And from what I remember that one too, again, the second half is quite interesting, specialized, very much like Rated R is in some respects, but still tried and true Red that I know and love. I still see that, even again, if there's a bit of a superficial deviation from time to time, you still get that root. And I love hearing it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before you bounce, feel free to drop a like and comment, subscribe to this channel with a ding on the bell, and share this video with your friends. And consider checking out the description here. There you'll find links to my other channels, as well as addresses to my other social media accounts and ways you can help support my work if you feel so inclined. May God bless you, and looking forward to when our paths cross again.